In the late 1990s, General Motors had all of the ingredients and resources to make a great car. Instead, they made the Pontiac Aztek. How do massive companies with unlimited resources and insanely talented teams still create bad products that nobody wants to buy? This video will explore the many reasons behind why this happens and how it can be avoided. The design of a car or any object is a direct reflection of the team that created it. If you have a team that works harmoniously, you'll end up with a harmonious design. If you have a team that doesn't have a clear direction or people are fighting and arguing with each other, you end up with the Pontiac Aztek. If you zoom in on small parts of the design, there are actually some cool ideas here, but there's no cohesive vision that brings it all together. None of the lines on the car really seem to have a direction or purpose. They don't relate to each other. The most obvious thing is that the car has two faces, one stacked on top of the other, but there are more subtle things as well. None of the details visually align with each other. You've got the weird hunchback silhouette. It's sort of a minivan, but not quite. There was a lack of direction in the design, and this usually is because there's a lack of direction from the team who's building it. Just having a clear goal or direction isn't enough though. In fact, you could argue that GM had a clear direction. GM wanted to make a car that was bold and different, but that vision was way too vague, and this is where the problem started. They wanted it to be attractive to older buyers who needed a practical minivan style vehicle, but they also wanted to make a trendy, youthful car that's fun for younger buyers. By trying to be both of those things, the Aztek accomplished neither of them. They just smashed a bunch of individually good ideas together and hoped for the best. It's kind of like combining tacos, sushi, hot dogs, and pasta, slapping it on a plate and trying to sell it to people. It went about as well as you'd expect. No matter how good GM's team of designers and engineers were, and they are very good, they're still working on a car based on a shaky premise. Now, I'm not trying to bash anyone at General Motors or any of these companies. The team at GM is incredibly talented, and I'm just pointing out this stuff so that we can all learn. I seriously respect GM for at least trying to take the risk, which many companies never do. None of us are perfect, and it's not like I have a perfect track record either. I've had my fair share of design fails, which I've covered in my other videos. The root of all product failure starts with an unclear or poorly planned vision, and most of the time, a poorly formulated vision is rooted in arrogance. GM execs cared more about imposing their vision onto customers instead of trying to understand their customers' needs. According to an employee, GM outright ignored very negative customer feedback in preliminary showings of the vehicle. Now, there's nothing wrong with getting polarizing feedback. Maybe 50% love the car and 50% hate it. That's often a sign that you're onto something big, because great creative leaps are usually controversial. Or maybe you just need to target a slightly different user group. But everyone hated the Aztek. Now, if everyone hates it, it might be a good time to reevaluate the design, but instead, GM moved forward with production anyway. Now, it does get a bit tricky here. Just because everyone hates a design doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad, but it would definitely cause me to reflect a little bit. The telephone, the umbrella, the light bulb, and the television were all mercilessly ridiculed when they first came out. That's actually one reason why innovation is so difficult. It's almost impossible to tell whether your design is genius or stupid, because the type of feedback you'll get for either of those possibilities is pretty much identical. A big reason why the Aztek failed is the way that GM managed their projects. Back in the old days, GM was so big that they could release a bad car, do some research after the launch, and then make a newer, improved version of the car later on. A great example of this is the Corvair in 1960. Now, the Corvair had some major handling problems when it first launched, but after a few years, GM fixed the issue and the Corvair was a decent car. This business model of making improvements after a launch just didn't work anymore. There was too much competition now, and customers weren't giving any second chances. The old style of project management extended beyond that as well. It was a very top-down management style. Apparently, Don Hackworth, the man in charge of the Aztek project, told everyone that making any negative comments about the design would get them kicked off the team. Even if you forget all of the other things going against the Aztek, this fear-based echo chamber pretty much guaranteed the failure of the project from the start. At its very core, creativity and innovation is about seeking the truth, and it doesn't seem like Don was interested in hearing about that. A lot of people who worked on the Aztek were also proud of the car. The design did everything it set out to do, and it was all completed on time and on budget. But once again, the customer doesn't care about whether the car is on time or on budget, and this says a lot about how the company operated. Now, I know I'm probably going to get a lot of comments defending the Aztec. After the show Breaking Bad, it resurfaced into popular culture, and the Aztec isn't a terrible car, or at the very least, it's not nearly as bad as all of the criticism that it got. It's just an example of a company that lost its way. What's most frustrating about the Aztec is that it could have been great. Somewhere in the studio, there's a sketch or a seedling of an idea that's absolutely brilliant, but it never saw the light of day because upper management was so focused on fulfilling their flawed vision. The concept car that the Aztec is based on is actually kind of interesting, and GM has introduced innovative new car platforms in the past, so it's not like the Aztec was automatically doomed to fail either. They successfully introduced the Chrysler minivans, which was a really successful line of vehicles. The big difference is that the Chrysler minivan line was a practical shift in proportional volume. There were good reasons for the design changes, whereas the Aztec was just this insane laundry list of ideas that didn't relate to each other. Once again, the main reason the Aztec failed is because it didn't have a clear vision. This is reason number one why big companies with unlimited resources still manage to make bad products. The wildly successful crossover vehicle category that became really popular in the mid-2000s did everything that the Aztec was trying to do, so it's not like GM was that far off. By the way, if you haven't subscribed, you should totally do it. It's free and it helps me out. On to the rest of the video. Innovation is polarizing and risky. Anything that's truly innovative is naturally going to be somewhat alien or unfamiliar. The most innovative work often comes from people who have nothing to lose and no one to impress. When Apple made the iPod, they were on the brink of bankruptcy. When Morris Motors made the Mini, it was in the middle of a major oil crisis and customers needed fuel-efficient vehicles. Of course, not all innovative designs come from desperate situations, but they at least come from some kind of need. GM was in a desperate situation in the early 2000s and they needed to innovate, but they still felt like they had something to lose. They didn't go all in. I wasn't in the executive meetings or anything, and we'll never know for sure, but I believe that's why they failed. They played it safe. Another reason why big companies fail to innovate is because the skills required to run a business are completely different from the skills that are necessary to create innovative design work. Running a big company requires people to set up processes and systems. As companies grow, they focus on reducing the risk of projects by having multiple layers of approval for any decision. They take all the guesswork out of decisions by relying heavily on measurable data. There's so much to lose with every product launch, so every decision needs to be made very carefully. It takes years to build up your reputation and brand, but only a few minutes to lose all credibility. And that's why large corporations have such large, drawn-out approval processes. Another thing is that as a corporation gets bigger and bigger, it starts to monopolize the market. So even if they do make a better product, it won't make a huge difference in terms of sales because everyone has to buy their product anyway. They're kind of the only game in town. One of the best things you could ever say to a corporation is tell them that you can manufacture their best-selling item for a lower price or introduce it to a wider audience. This is a super low-risk way to make more money because the best-selling item is already proven to work and they're guaranteed to make a greater profit. Introducing a new idea has all sorts of problems that go along with it. Most design and innovation is hard to measure. You can't check the data on it because there's no data available. It's risky and big corporations hate risk. This means that people who are involved in innovation or design aren't usually the ones who are valued in larger corporations. The sales and marketing people are, as Steve Jobs so eloquently put it. This is why Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, is so focused on expanding the market for Apple's existing products rather than creating completely new markets. They have a decent line of products that work well, so why reinvent the wheel? That's just way too risky. Now, to be fair, Apple has been incredibly innovative with their incremental improvements on chips. The M1 chip is actually pretty revolutionary in a lot of ways, but they haven't really created a new product category like the iPod or iTunes or the iPhone. There were plenty of other music downloading sites or MP3 players or smartphones before Apple made their version of them, but Apple kind of completely redefined the way we look at those product categories. They were truly revolutionary and innovative. Since the passing of Steve Jobs, new product development has not been Apple's focus. However, their new focus on expanding has worked very, very well. The company is worth almost $3 trillion now, almost 10 times more than 10 years ago. But they will eventually need to redefine product categories just like they used to if they want their reign to continue. While creating new ideas is very risky, it's also necessary, otherwise your company will slowly crumble. Who knows, maybe their new augmented reality glasses will be the next big leap for them. Because the company is so big and all of their efforts are focused so heavily on marketing and sales, it's going to be harder than ever for them to pull this off. I'm rooting for them though, which leads me to part 3 of why big companies make bad products. They fail to adapt. GM actually took a huge risk by making the Aztec. It takes years to build a brand, but only a few minutes to completely destroy it. For that reason, innovation is viewed as a threat in most large companies rather than an asset. Most companies will irrationally cling to what made them successful in the first place at all costs. GM and Apple are not the only companies to struggle with this by any stretch. And it's really just human nature. People are just naturally very tribal. Historically, individuals who challenge the conventions of the larger tribe tend to be removed. Martin Luther King and Abraham Lincoln are all people who were assassinated for challenging the status quo, and companies are no different. They don't usually assassinate anyone, but they don't like their beliefs to be challenged. My friend Rafi always told me that most companies make decisions on the basis of protecting their company's conventions rather than taking risks. Companies are looking for other like-minded people who look and think like them in order to protect the tribe. The CEO is like the chief of the tribe. And let's just put it this way. If you disagree with the CEO, one of you has to go, and it's not going to be them. This is one big reason why companies have so much trouble adapting. One of the most commonly cited examples of a company failing to adapt is Kodak. Kodak is a company that makes film and photography equipment. People say that the reason why Kodak failed is because they tried to stick with film when it was obvious that digital cameras would be taking over. That is partially true, but it's not the whole story. It is true that Kodak didn't adapt their business to customer needs. The worst part is that they easily could have. Kodak invented a digital camera in 1975. The bigger issue is that their film business was incredibly profitable. Now, this doesn't sound like a problem, but it's a classic example of chasing profits ahead of what the customer actually wants. Kodak focused on what was best for them rather than what was best for their customer. And to be fair, this did work really well for them for decades, but it's a big reason why companies fail to innovate. Most corporations are incentivized to just ruthlessly chase quarterly earnings. As long as the stock number goes up in the near term, the shareholders are happy. Companies are so focused on turning a profit in the next 3 months every quarter that they completely forget the looming threat that's just a few years away. In Kodak's case, this was the digital camera. The world probably would have benefited from Kodak's digital camera innovation in the 1970s, but it didn't benefit Kodak, so it never saw the light of day. Kodak paid the ultimate price by filing for bankruptcy in 2012. A lot of people think that Kodak stubbornly kept making film and made no effort to switch to digital cameras in the early 2000s, but that isn't true. Kodak invested a lot of time and money into selling digital cameras. In fact, Kodak captured 21% of the total market share for digital cameras in the early 2000s. The problem was that digital cameras were just much less profitable than film. Film provided a source of recurring revenue, so everyone constantly needed to buy new rolls of film if they wanted to keep taking pictures. With a digital camera, you buy it once and that's it. Film is also really hard to make. It requires lots of specialized fabrication knowledge and expensive tools, and this made it harder for competitors to make film, so Kodak could charge more for it. But with digital cameras, anyone could order a few parts from various manufacturers and put together a camera with very little specialized knowledge. More competition means more competitive pricing. So even though Kodak was a major player in the digital camera industry, it was never going to be as profitable as their core film business. Kodak failed to adapt. They stuck to the idea of being a film and camera business, even though the market was doomed, no matter what they did. But that doesn't mean that the company was guaranteed to fail. Fujifilm, another film company, did the opposite of what Kodak did. Rather than trying to compete in the unprofitable digital camera industry, they tried to think about ways they could use their highly specialized film technology for other applications. Fujifilm branched out into cosmetics, skincare, and pharmaceuticals, and this is ultimately what allowed them to survive and thrive as a business. Fuji saw the writing on the wall, and they knew that the camera industry was dead, so they adapted and are more successful for it. Kodak insisted on being a camera and film company and paid the price. Once again, a big reason why companies fail to adapt is because they just don't think broadly enough about how they can use their skills and expertise. Really, I think the main reason why big companies fail is because of fear. They refuse to see the writing on the wall, or they don't want to branch out into a new category, or they're afraid to adapt. All of these things are rooted in fear. This can easily apply to your own design work or even your own life. How often do you choose the proven method instead of trying something new? I'm not saying you need to reinvent everything on every project, but it doesn't hurt to explore a little bit. Always remember that the greatest innovators had the courage and conviction to carry out their ideas. They weren't driven by fear. It's perfectly normal to be scared, but you don't have to let that control you. Anyway, thanks for checking out the video. If you enjoyed it and want to see more content like this, please subscribe and hit the little bell button. It's free for you and it helps me out. Thanks everyone. And also don't forget to hit the like button if you haven't already too. Have a great day.